They say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But when both enemies have fangs, it gets complicated. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Blade 2. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows that are based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today, first is someone who always knows how to hunt down the best movie details. Welcome, Tim Williams.
Better get you some sunscreen, Buttercup.
Oh, it's going to be so fun making quotes of this movie that we can actually do on this show.
Right.
All right.
I was very selective.
Yeah. And second, our very own Night Stalker of pop culture, it's Nicholas Pepin.
You do not know who you are messing with.
So here we are. We're talking about Blade 2. If you can go back to into our archives, Nicholas and I have already discussed the first Blade, so you could go back and listen to that one. But here we are talking about the Guillermo del Toro Blade movie.
Which I will say, I did not realize that he directed it until the movie was over, because I hadn't watched it in a long time, and I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it. And that David S. Goyer was the writer on it. I was like, oh, well, those are two names that I recognized that I had no idea was associated with this movie, so...
Well, Goyer wrote the first movie, too.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, even though it was Stephen Norrington that directed the first one. Mm-hmm. But he didn't want to come back for the second one. I was okay with that because, I mean, there's some Guillermo del Toro movies that I think are a little weird, but the man does know how to direct a movie.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And this was only his fourth movie. Yeah. Like, doesn't matter. American, Mexican, this was his fourth movie.
Yeah.
He had done, in 92, his very first movie was a Mexican horror film called Kronos. Have either one of you seen that?
No. I think I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I did find out Ron Perlman's in it. So
wow.
Yeah, his connection with Ron Perlman goes back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think both of you probably know 1997, he did Mimic.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know who's in that one?
Ron Perlman?
No. But someone else who's in this movie is in that one. Do either one of you remember?
I barely remember seeing Mimic, let alone
Yeah. Norman Reedus.
Oh, okay.
So. Who? It's been so long since I've seen Blade 2. I forgot Norman Reedus was in this one.
I did too. I'm not gonna lie. I did as well. As soon as I saw him, I was like, "Oh, hey." Yeah. No, honestly, there was a lot about this movie. It's been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah.
That I had forgotten. There was stuff that I really remembered. And then right before this one, Guillermo del Toro directed another Mexican film called The Devil's Backbone. Are either one of you familiar with that?
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah. So I'm the same as both of you. Mimic was the only one I was familiar with. But yeah, so here we go. Blade 2 released March 22nd of 2002, which means it was just a couple of months before Spider-Man. So
wow,
kind of placing in the comic book movie timeline where this goes. Of course, the first movie came out in the 90s, and then you had X-Men in 2000, and then you get this one in 2002, right before Spider-Man. So we always talk about like the movies that got the genre going. This was still right there in the mix. So when did Tim? I'll ask you first. When did you first see Blade 2?
I went to see this one in the theater. It was me and a friend of mine at the time, who I did not realize had never seen the first Blade. He was just like, "Yeah, I'll go see it with you." And so we went and saw it, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. It's funny going back and watching it now because some of the things that I liked about it then kind of irritated me now. Because, it's early, early special effects, especially back then.
We'll get into that. Yeah.
So it was like, But yeah, I mean, I really liked it. I've seen it like after it came out. It was in the theater. I'm pretty sure I had the DVD copy of it because I had the first one. I never bought the third one. We won't talk about that one. But
one day we will.
I'm sure we will.
I'm sure.
One day
we're not going to talk about it right now. So but yeah, so I'd watched it several times back then, but it's probably been at least 15, if not close to, between 15 and less than 20, more than 15 years since I've watched it all the way through.
All right, how about you, Nicholas?
I am having a hard time remembering where I was at that point. When did you say in 2002?
Mm-hmm.
March 22nd.
I think I was still in Virginia at the time. I don't think I had moved to Florida yet, because I was in that transition I was getting ready to. So, but I know I went and saw it in theaters opening weekend. I just don't remember if it was by myself or with a group of friends I had in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I honestly cannot remember at all. Like, there's a chance I saw it in theaters because I would have been in college in 2002, and I went and saw a lot of things.
Right.
It's one of the things you do. But part of me almost thinks maybe I didn't, but then I don't know when I saw it for the first time. This is one that really stumped me.
It was that memorable. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I will say, to kind of reveal all that, I do like this movie.
Yeah.
But
I'm just saying,
but,
your first time watch was not memorable of it.
No, yeah. I can't really remember much about it seeing it for the first time. I know that Nicholas and I mentioned this in the other episode, but just to bring it up here. So there was originally a plan with the first Blade movie. It's a deleted scene in which they wanted to introduce Morbius.
Oh, okay.
And so, I don't know if you're familiar. There is a deleted scene where Morbius is apparently like standing up on a rooftop. I want to say it was the director, Stephen Norrington, who actually played Morbius for that scene, because you just see him in the distance. And then, because that's what David S. Goyer wanted for the sequel, he wanted to do Morbius. Marvel said no. Again, this is 2002
right?
Or 2001, whenever they were writing the movie. Marvel said no because they had plans to use Morbius for his own movie. Thoughts?
Well, when they finally got around to it about 20 years later,
yeah,
man, did they get that wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, would it have been any better if it was done in 2002? Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm curious about too. I think the answer is yes.
I do too. Like, I think like at that point, the superhero, the comic book movies were kind of defining themselves. Like there wasn't that like typical, storyline and typical what we consider now as a comic book movie. So I think he would have had a lot more freedom to explore that notion, that story.
And we're going to get into it quite a bit here, but the fact that they were able to get away with and do a lot of what they did in the first Blade movie, and then in this movie, doing a rated R comic book movie, and nobody batted an eye. Nobody said, you can't do that. Nobody fought. They were just like, oh, cool, vampire movie, Blade, Wesley Snipes, awesome, who cares? Just go do it. And then they did it. And it was a decent movie, and, we'll get there, but, it was fun. But yeah, I think had they done it, Morbius would have been not as studio controlled as what we got with Jared Leto later.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I also wonder, because, we've talked about how the first Blade movie, and I would even say Blade 2, that both of them kind of fall under the radar where people at the time, especially, didn't know they were comic book movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes.
I had no inclination that,
Yeah. Because it wasn't until the third one that the third one actually opens with the Marvel logo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you introduce Morbius, I think that there's a certain fan base that would all of a sudden go, wait, I'm familiar with Morbius, and maybe would make a bigger connection to to it being a comic book movie. But yeah, so I think they screwed up by not putting Morbius in it. Not that we didn't, again, like Nicholas is saying, not that we didn't get a movie that's good to watch, but there is a universe out there where they introduced Morbius and they did it right. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the comic book connections.
This is the comic book connection theme.
The Blade movies are loosely based on the Marvel Comics character introduced in The Tomb of Dracula #10 in 1973, created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist Gene Colan. Blade 2 expands on the character's mythology by introducing elements not directly from the comics, but inspired by them. The film's concept of the blood pack is reminiscent of various vampire hunting teams in the comics, while the movie takes liberties with its lore and maintains the core essence of Blade as a relentless hunter caught between two worlds. The introduction of the Reapers, a new breed of vampires, echoes various instances in the comics where Blade has faced alternate versions of vampires, reinforcing his role as a warrior who must adapt to increasingly dangerous threats. The film also amplifies the tension between Blade and the traditional vampire hierarchy, a reoccurring theme in his comic book appearances. So yes, if you didn't gather from that comic book connection, there are no comic book connections. Like you would have thought maybe the Reapers was a thing in the comics. I can't find anything. You would think that maybe there was a group that, was a trained group of vampires to fight Blade, like the vampire equivalent of Blade to go against Blade. I couldn't find anything. The character Whistler and Blade are even the only two characters from the comic books. Like you would think if you're going to have a character named Scud that he's from the comics, but he wasn't. So this one was a pretty very loosely inspired. Let's just use the character, put him in this scenario.
Yeah. I will say, like, going back and watching it now, I could tell it was very loosely based, like, with not even with much knowledge of the Blade comics, just because it seemed to veered much more into the horror territory than like the hero comic the first one leaned into that pretty well too, but this one really went for it, which, knowing as Del Toro, makes more sense. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me that none of that storyline didn't come from a comic.
I legit was, while I was watching it yesterday, was like, Blood Pack. Oh, I wonder what they've done in the comics. Like, that's pretty. Oh, they're not from the comics. Oh, no. Oh,
yeah.
But I feel like that's something they should have done. Like, that's something that, like, I'm surprised that Marvel hasn't picked up on and turned into character later on, like has happened so many other times with, other movies or comics, shows like Diggle or Harley Quinn.
Well, they've never done the Blood Pack. There are some storylines like Curse of the Mutants, which came out in, let's see if I can remember, 2010. I could be wrong on that, but that one does have Blade in it. Kind of, I think he's battling against some sort of evolved vampire. So they at least kind of use that aspect. But even the Romeo and Juliet-esque relationship that he is clearly developing with Nyssa in this, like you would think there's an element of that in the comic, but I couldn't find anything. I don't know. Like, again, as I've clearly stated on this podcast before, I'm bigger DC than I am Marvel. So Marvel, I do have to do a little bit more digging because I'm not as familiar. But I did as much digging as I could muster, and I could not find any comic book connections.
Well, that's a real easy section of this episode. Then. All right, moving on.
Moving on. Yeah.
Well, we've already been talking about some of the characters, so let's talk about the cast. Of course, we got Wesley Snipes as Blade, the one and only. Then we've got Chris Christopherson surprisingly returning.
Right.
As Abraham Whistler. What did y'all think of? I guess that's not a spoiler because it's the very opening of the movie. Yeah. So let's say it's not a spoiler. But what do you think of the way they brought Whistler back? Like, was that a cheap gimmick, or did you think it worked?
I mean, in the world that this stuff makes sense, I guess it makes sense. I don't know. It seemed like, because they essentially, like, I feel like they had to retcon some stuff just to make him not be completely dead from the end of the first movie anyway.
Yeah. Which they kind of show us by doing a flashback. But it was like, it's a little bit of a stretch. Like, clearly in the first movie, when Blade's walking away and then you hear the gun go off, like, what else could have happened? And then how in the world are you explaining that they experimented on Whistler and brought him back to life, and apparently there's a cure for vampirism? Is that what we're supposed to take at the beginning as well?
Yeah, not really well explained.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could have added a lot of that into my weird science at the in the second half, but figured let's just go ahead and knock it out. All right, then we got all of our made up characters. So let's mention them. We got Ron Perlman as Reinhardt.
Yes.
Of course, this is before he would play Hellboy a few years later with Guillermo del Toro. What'd you think of Ron Perlman as the kind of bad guy who has to partner up with Blade?
He does what Ron Perlman does.
He does what he does.
Yeah. I mean, he was a highlight for me. Like I remember seeing it when I saw it for the first time. He was like, I was almost a fan of his until I liked him almost more than Wesley Snipes in the movie. Like yeah.
He's just got this.
I can't talk today.
Yeah, because as much as Wesley Snipes always portrays this, cool, dude, I think Ron Perlman portrays it better.
Yeah,
in this movie,
he's got the presence for it. Yeah,
yeah. He's just like nothing bothers me.
Mm-hmm. He was a good antagonist for Blade, though, for sure.
Yeah. Then we've got, and I apologize if I butcher this name, Leonore Varela, who plays Nissa.
Works for me.
Yeah. Bethany will get a kick out of this. So she is the actress that played the original Marta on Arrested Development. So, whoever's an Arrested Development fan knows who I'm talking about there. I don't know what else there is to say about her other than she's really, because it really feels like she's in this movie just to give Blade a semi-weakness, although Whistler's supposed to also be that weakness. And
yeah, I know you kind of mentioned like the whole, Romeo and Juliet thing, but it's not well executed at all. So, and she's really only there to be a connection to the big bad that you find out, in third act. So she's there by convenience more than anything else. Like I didn't feel her character did that much.
It's like they started with the idea of having a love story and then gave up on it, and then just didn't bother to pull her out of the rest of the movie, or they were just like, forget that. We're not doing that. Yeah.
Like, I mean, Blade is kind of emotionless anyway, but I didn't really see her giving much, I didn't see the draw of her to him that much either, so.
Then we've got Norman Reedus, who many people would love to see return to the MCU in a different capacity. And he is playing a character named Scud, who apparently was the replacement Whistler.
For a moment.
For however long it's been since the first movie. Yeah. Again, we won't talk about it too much because we like to not spoil things until the second half. But I think also he was just another character. I think his character was more of a stereotypical, like this type of movie must have that type of character.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then we've got Luke Goss playing the, again, antagonist who also...
Blade's got a lot of enemies in this movie.
Yeah. Plays Nomak. Now, we talked about the Norman Reedus and Ron Perlman being in previous Guillermo del Toro movies. Luke Goss would actually return because he plays Prince Nuada in Hellboy 2.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So he also plays the main bad guy in Hellboy 2. So Guillermo del Toro always brings him back for the sequels. That's what brings him in for the sequels. So, is there anybody else on the cast that was even worth mentioning? I mean, there's a couple of recognizable people.
Yeah.
But
you got to talk about Donnie Yen. I mean, I didn't know he was in this movie until when they showed up to watching. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize Donnie Yen was in this. So, with this being kind of a semi-martial arts movie.
Yeah, like I was like, hey, that's Donnie Yen. And then he was cool. And then like he just disappeared. Like I don't even remember how he died.
I don't think we saw how he died.
Oh.
I think he was, I want to say he was like he was one of the either charred corpses or something when they're in the tunnels.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, could be.
So
The only person I want to talk about other than the Donnie Yen was Matt Scholes, Chupa.
Yeah.
And the only reason I want to talk about him is because he played an entirely different character in the first movie.
Yeah.
They were just like, hey, you were in the first movie. Why don't you come back as a different guy?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I knew him from the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah, the Fast and the Furious movies obviously is where his thing is from, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, he played Kreese in the first movie. Yeah, I guess they just liked him enough that it was like, yeah, let's bring him back. Even though we killed him off.
Yeah. Let's
have him be another.
It's his twin brother.
All right. So before we talk too much and get into too many spoilers, let's go ahead and let a listener know who's never seen Blade 2. Should they watch it, or should they just read some comics? Not like they can read any comics, that would be the same story. But should they read a comic instead? So Nicholas, I'll let you go first. Watch it or read it?
Because I don't know the Blade comics as well as I do a lot of other Marvel stuff, I guess watch it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I don't feel like this is what I would consider a comic book movie. It's really an action, horror, martial arts mushed together kind of movie, which it does those three things fairly well. But yeah, I don't think watching it doesn't mean, ooh, I want to read a Blade comic. Like it doesn't make me want to watch, it doesn't make me want to read any of the comics, especially knowing that it's not connected. Like if there was a comic that had the Blood Pact in it, I would probably want to read that. But since it's not there, just enjoy the movie for what it is.
Well, now I will say there is a comic that has Blood Pact in it. It's the Blade 2 adaptation comic. So you could... But no, I agree with you. I'd say watch it because that's the only way you're going to get a story like this. Yeah, I mean, but again, it's taking the character from the comics and putting them into a situation. It's just a situation that was completely fabricated for the movie. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would definitely say watch it. And you talked about going to the movies with a friend who had never seen the first Blade. I don't think you have to see the first Blade.
No, he enjoyed it and didn't. Like I said, it wasn't until after the movie was over. He's like, I never saw the first one. I was like, oh, wow. So, because I think I made a mention of how much more action packed it was. Like it was much more of an action movie than the first one. Because
you really, Blade kind of is self-explained. He kind of explains who Whistler is in that opening. Mm-hmm. So you didn't really need to know that much about Whistler. All the other characters are brand new. There's the throwaway mention of Deacon Frost, the villain from the first one. So yeah, but I don't think you need to see the first movie. So go out and just see Blade 2, even if you haven't seen the first one. And I would say, even if you haven't seen the first one, watch Blade 2.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
All right, so let's get a little bit spoilerish and let's take a trip around the spinner rack, and we start off with our favorite quote, our speech bubble from the movie. I will say I had a hard time finding one that didn't have curse word in it.
Yeah.
I think the obvious one is the one Nicholas stated as his intro is, you obviously don't know who you are effing with. That's just a great line delivered wonderfully by Wesley Snipes. Mm-hmm. But I went with this one, which again also has cursing in it. So I'll edit myself. They tortured me almost to death and then let me heal in a vat of blood so they could go at it again. sorry SOBs could have at least fixed my leg while they were at it.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, I went, yeah, you know what, with all the healing that happens with these vampires, they have a chance. And the fact that Chris Christopherson doesn't actually have a bum leg, like, it made no sense why he had to have the bum leg in this movie. So, there you go. All right, so Tim, what quote did you have?
So this one caught my attention because, once again, Marvel movie. But Scud makes the comment, "Lock up your daughters, boys and girls. Yeah. The Dark Knight returns." The Dark
Knight returns.
And I was like, oh, that's clever.
That was a good one.
That's clever.
Yeah.
Which, again, also funny because David S. Goyer, who wrote this movie, would also go on with Nolan and write the
Dark Knight
trilogy. So
I guess he was
putting
putting his application in right there.
I struggled. I was like, man, is this the time where I can finally make Laramy bleep me?
I will. So if you want to say it, say it.
But I read through and I was like, okay. Instead, I went with the when you meet the lawyer first, and Blade's like, "You're human," and he goes, "Barely. I'm a lawyer."
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. No, again, I'm I thought obviously about the "you don't know who you're effing with," like was my initial, but I was like, I wonder if I can find one that doesn't have profanity in it. And so I went on to IMDb and was just reading through the quotes, and I'm just going, no. In fact, there's some that I honestly don't remember those curse words being in the movie. There were a couple of them.
Yeah, I was like, man, we might have to move over to Pop Culture Roulette to do this episode.
Well, because it's so rare to do a rated R comic book.
Yeah, true. Very true.
So there are only a handful, and of course this was one of the first. So
it's gonna be real tough when you get to Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yes. Well, we've already covered Chad and I have covered Deadpool.
Yeah, but Deadpool and Wolverine
we have gone through. But yeah, yeah, there it is. All right, let's get into our favorite scene, which we call our moving panel. So, what is a scene that either you just enjoyed watching as a movie, or a scene that you felt, hey, that was a very comic book like scene? I'm just gonna go ahead and say I couldn't place it too specifically. Everything that happens in the tunnels, because we talked about how little I remembered of my first watch of this movie, but I remembered the tunnels. Like, I remembered the Reapers popping out of the water. I remembered them crawling around the tunnels with Ron Perlman. Like, I remembered so much of that. So, the tunnel scene I just think is a great action piece, and it mixes that horror element of you're trapped with the monsters, but it also had the big action moments. So yep, that's what it was for me. It was the everything about all the tunnel scenes. How about you, Tim?
Yeah, the tunnel scenes that were good. That's definitely on my list. When he initially fights the Reapers, I guess, when they come into the warehouse or whatever, and they're in their kind of ninja gear or whatever. Like, I remember that stuck out to me the first time watching it. Like, that was so cool to see, like, that kind of action in the movie. Of course, looking back, we talked about earlier, looking at the special effects, it's very cartoonish, which at that time was acceptable. I mean, look, even some of the stuff we see now in the Marvel movies still looks kind of cartoonish when you look at it. But yeah, that was by far one of my favorite scenes. That was a scene I always look forward to going back and watching. So that's gonna be mine.
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much taken it. I mean, the big tunnel. I mean, the tunnel scene is basically the main set piece of the movie anyway. So
yeah,
I mean that was, I mean, the fight. Any of the action pieces, the fight scenes were really good. Yeah. Some of the exposition dragged a little bit, but the fight scenes were really well choreographed and really well done.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and get into this because Tim's brought it up. We've kind of mentioned it earlier. Let's talk about the weird science. And right off the bat, let's talk about the CGI.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what I like to call stretchy Blade.
Yeah.
So yeah, we first get a good glimpse of that CGI in, I believe, the scene Tim's talking about. Where
Yeah, that's the first time you kind of see it.
Yeah,
for sure.
They're fighting in front of the big spotlights, and all of a sudden you go, he ain't moving right, and you realize it's entirely CGI. But do y'all agree with me? It was like Blade got stretchy.
Oh yeah.
Like Wesley Snipes is not like a big man. I mean, he's you know he's obviously very fit, but there was times where you're like, is he really skinny compared to what he normally?
Yeah, they made him just really unnecessarily skinny when they CGI'd him. And yeah, he did look very cartoonish. I will say, it's still not as cartoonish as when Deacon Frost explodes in the first Blade movie.
True.
That is one of the cartoonish things I ever stick with, but yeah, it was very, very bad. The practical effects in this movie though
are great.
Are awesome.
Yeah, exactly, which is why it's such a juxtaposition. Like they're like completely opposite because it's so CGI that you can tell,
And I will say, with the Reapers, with the jaw opening up and all that, I don't know how much of that is CGI into practical effect, but it was good. Like
it could have been that was CGI, and they spent all the money on that, and it was like, well, we still got to do these action scenes. Like, just do the best you can with what we got. Because those sequences are so well done that like I said, if it's practical or if it is CGI, those are good.
Now, then, if they ever had any of the Reapers or Nomak, all of a sudden jump over to climb up a wall or something, it again went, this part is being played by Gumby. But yeah, it wasn't a fan of the. They couldn't turn people into CGI. Is what they couldn't do in this. Again, it was early 2000s, so CGI still not prime. And the CGI, like I said, is better than I think some of the CGI was in the first Blade movie. So I will give it that. Yeah, because the animated blood we got in the first Blade movie, very cartoonish. So it was a little bit better. All right, another thing I have is about the Reapers. If the Reapers are such a threat, why does it take them so long to act the vampires? Like, they're aware of Nomak. They're aware that he is turning others and creating essentially an army. But why do they wait so long to get Blade's help? Like, that was kind of my question. And then how much has actually been known? Because that opening scene with Nomak, which I also had problems with, like him getting into the... Because they say, the woman says to him, which I never figured out if that woman was a vampire or a human.
Yeah.
The woman says to him, your blood is very unique. Can they not tell what he is? They've clearly taken a blood sample. All of that. Everything about Nomak and the Reapers and their the whole setup behind that just made no sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple other things we got yet, but
Oh, I got other things too. But I mean, I can go ahead and just make my other, and then we can discuss.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, I've also got the whole plan of the vampires is once again to capture Blade so that they can experiment and figure out what allows him to walk in the daylight. So that means Blade surviving is very important to this plan. Yet there are multiple times in this movie that they are putting Blade at risk of being killed. And you would think that would completely ruin their plan. Because they're just constantly putting him in danger. And so there's that. And they had ample opportunity to have just captured him. Like, why have him go after Nomak? Because the other thing, which leads into one of my others, is they clearly are equipped to go against the Reapers. They are. I mean, I know they don't do it successfully, but they are. And they have these high-tech gadgets because, which leads to my other weird science thing, because Scud is working for them. And Scud's the one who comes up with like the UV bombs, which is the most effective thing against the Reapers. So that also leads me into, how did Scud keep his betrayal a secret for so long, and then Blade then revealing that he knew the entire time? That made no sense. So why did you keep Scud around? Like, there's no reveal there. It just it did not make sense.
Yeah,
it's not a perfect movie. Okay, well, we
that
can
was
say
that was definitely on my list. Like,
yeah,
like they kept saying, like at some point they said there must be somebody on the inside, and it's like, well, there's 3 people.
Yeah.
And we know it's not you, and we know it's not Whistler, so it kind of has to be the new guy. But at the same time,
the new guy.
But at the same point, like there's no hint of it at all until he's like, "I betrayed you." Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, and then he was like, "Yeah, I knew the whole time."
Yeah. I also didn't understand how, because the bomb that he puts in the back of Ron Perlman's head is to release, was it silver or something into his head, which would cause his head to explode. I don't understand how Scud holding it in his hand causes his entire body to just disintegrate into an explosion. A pretty contained explosion, because there's no actual explosion. His body just explodes.
I had the head bomb on my weird science, so yeah, it made no sense at all.
Well, is it the fact that he says it'll go off even if it's tampered with? So you would think that every time he was in a fight with the Reapers, it should have gone off? Especially when they're being overrun by the Reapers right before the big bomb goes off. You know, you would think a Reaper has touched it. Like, it should... Yeah. I don't know. This movie's flawed. It is. But again, that's where I go to. I think Scud was a character just because you need to have that betrayal in a movie like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although that betrayal serves no purpose. There's no reason for his betrayal. Okay, the bomb ended up being a dud. Okay, couldn't it have just been a dud? Like, we already had gotten... I mean, couldn't have we had a moment very similar to when Scud shows Whistler the UV bomb and it doesn't work at first, and then it does end up working? Like, couldn't we have had that moment and maybe had an even more delayed reaction? Like, it didn't work, and then later when they're fighting, like, instead of Blade splitting Reinhardt in half, like, maybe instead the bomb actually goes off.
Well, remember, he had, Scud had the bomb in his hand, and Blade was like, "Oh, and another thing, it's not a dud." And then he hits the button and it blows up.
Yeah.
So clearly, Blade apparently is some sort of also technical genius, because he was able to rig the bomb so that it could blow a human up instead of a vampire. Yeah,
there's a lot about that doesn't make it. I even wanted to write down, now that we're just talking, it's popped back into my head. Why does Nomak go all Technicolor before he disintegrates at the end of the movie? Like, did y'all notice that? Like, he turns like purples and he goes all Technicolor. He doesn't just burn up like so many of the others do. Like, is that...
We had to differentiate between what kind of vampire he was compared to the other vampires.
Yeah, but all the other Reapers just turned into ash, burning ash, so they didn't go all Technicolor.
Because he was the first?
I guess. He was the original. He was the Patient Zero.
Magic.
What did y'all think of the autopsy scene? I'll get the word out.
Yeah, that was cool. Like it was very reminiscent of Alien, like that whole section.
You thought of I thought of The Thing.
Oh, of The Thing too. Yeah, true. Oh yeah. I've seen Alien more than I've seen The Thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, practical effects made it, pretty, must have been a fun day on set to just poke around on that, fake corpse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did like, I mean, I like that they used it as a setup. Like they used it to show that he would be able to kill him by getting at him from the side instead of straight on. So I did like that.
Yeah.
I will say the part about the fang and it had a neurotoxin in it, which would paralyze the victim. Why was that brought up? Because that
we never saw it go into effect.
Yeah, when was that ever a part of what we saw? At any point?
To add plausibility to something that we didn't talk about again? I don't know.
I don't know. There was a good amount of stuff where I'm just like, why was that there? And why was that needed? And because also with couldn't you have just made a big bomb instead of your big bomb is just a case of a whole bunch of little bombs? That was another problem that I had. But, and also, correct me if I'm wrong. One time, to tell you an old story, one time I participated in a little carnival that my school was doing, and I agreed to go into the water tank. And I'm sitting on the little platform. My feet are just under the water. I later discovered that when you have bare feet that are underneath the water on a bright sunny day, they get very, very burnt. Because water kind of acts like a lens.
Yeah.
So diving into water when a giant UV bomb goes out, how did that not kill Nessa and Reinhardt? Just kind of slightly burned them.
Good question.
There was a scene that kind of boggled my mind a little bit, which is similar to that, where one of the vampires, I don't remember which one, was wearing their full body get up and had a glove on. And they put their hand kind of into the sun a little bit.
It was Reinhardt.
Okay, it was Reinhardt. Yeah. And it started smoking. And it was like,
yes,
he's wearing a glove. Isn't that the point of the suit? So that they...
Yeah.
Because like in the first movie, that was how the vampires got around during the day. They put on like head to toe, like some kind of suit, gloves, hats, and motorcycle helmets, and like they were able to get around. And it's like he's like, but so like, why bother putting any of that on if it's not going to protect you?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about that one.
That's a good one. Yeah,
it's I don't know. I'm starting to this is one of those times where I'm starting to feel, is this movie really as good as I think it is?
It's good until you start talking about it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and do it. Let's make our final decision. Back at Stack It or Trade It. Tim, what say you?
This is one that I'm going to stack. It's not baggable because it's not, like I said, it doesn't really fit for me as far as like a true comic book movie, even though you're using a comic book IP. But it's still a fun watch every so often. So, I mean, I don't think it's one that I'll definitely watch again, even with all its flaws and weird science. But yeah, so it's right there in the middle for me.
Yeah, I'm the exact same reasoning that I'm putting on Stack. I mean, with most any kind of movie of this ilk, like it's easy to sit here and pick apart all the flaws because it's more fun. But it's a fun watch. Is it good? Nah, but it's fun. It's using Tim's, scale. It's
rewatchability.
It's got a high rewatchability factor.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
Yeah. If you're in the mood for that type of just mindless action, just cool, maybe not cool effects, but cool, cool kills and, some martial arts kind of stuff in there. I mean, it's a good mindless popcorn flick.
Yeah, I reiterate everything you guys said. It is a stack it, and my reasoning that I wrote down was the exact same as Tim's, because this isn't really a comic book movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a action horror movie with vampires that just happens to feature a character that exists in comic books.
Right.
But no, it is a fun movie. It's a fun one to watch. So I do want to follow that up with this question that we kind of alluded to earlier. Is it better than the first Blade? Is this a case in which the sequel is better than the original?
For me, no. I still like the original better.
What is it about the original?
I haven't watched it in a while, but just maybe because I was a fan of the first one, that it needed a sequel. But this one, because it's so it seems detached from the first one. So yeah, I mean, I like the first one too. Maybe because it feels more like an origin, maybe not origin story, but I don't know. Come back to me.
Well, let me put this into your head while you're thinking, and I'll come back to you. Does the differences between the first Blade and the second Blade, does it not remind you of the differences between Alien and Aliens?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you say, Nicholas? We'll let Tim stew on it a little bit.
I as well like the first one better. It could solely be because it was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you had made these movies in a different order, maybe I would have liked this one better. I don't know. This one is as much fun as it is to watch. It goes a little bit too bonkers at points.
Mm-hmm.
Where the first one, to use the word grounded would be incorrect. Because we're already starting at a point where, like, vampires exist.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, the rave scene in the first movie hits better, because this one seemed like they were just like, we're putting a rave scene in because everybody loved the rave scene.
Right.
You know, it's kind of the problem that some of the Spider-Man movies have. I love all of the Spider-Man movies, but it's like, they put too many villains in. Like, if you just, like... We don't have, just because it's a sequel doesn't mean we need to have more villains. Like, we're good with, like, one or two.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be like, now we have 7, you know? But yeah, I mean, it's, you know.
Do you think, though, because think about it, this is the first comic book movie since Superman and Batman. This is the first Marvel comic book movie to have a sequel. Do you think that this, like, set a new standard for actually creating a franchise out of the comic book characters?
I would agree with that, yes. I mean, you know, because it showed that it's still marketable. You can do a sequel and still, you know, somewhat keep to the level of the first one. And you know, still be a fun movie and you know, be able to build off of it. And not, you know, completely throw everything away like Batman tried to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm getting at. Like, do you think, because we talked about Spider-Man came out just 2 months later, like May of 2002. We talked about how Blade, when it came out in 97, how it was, you know, a game changer. Like, pretty much, you know, Superman started it all, Batman, you know, ramped it back up, and then Blade, I will always say Blade is what essentially gave us the modern comic book movie. Do you think that if Blade 2 had done very poorly and not been a successful sequel, do you think we would have gotten Spider-Man 2, X-Men 2?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There was too much money made. Yeah.
Yeah, well...
I mean, for purely for money reasons, they would have made a sequel.
If Spider-Man had come out, like, a year after Blade 2, maybe. But, I mean, since they already had... Spider-Man was already in the can when Blade 2 was released.
Yeah.
Like, the marketing campaign around Spider-Man was already in high...
No, I'm not saying Spider-Man wouldn't have been made.
Right.
But do you think they would have been a little more reluctant to make a Spider-Man 2?
No.
But I will say X-Men 2 because X2 came out in 2003, the next year.
Maybe.
So do you think Marvel would have reconsidered? Like, should we actually release a sequel?
Well, those are two different instances. Sorry, go ahead, Nicholas.
Yeah, I don't know. Because of something that we talked about a lot with the Blade movie, and we touched on a little bit with this one. X-Men, everybody knew was a comic book movie. Spider-Man, everybody knew was a comic book movie. Blade, people like us did because we're nerds. And this is the world that we live in. But there are a lot of people who went and saw this movie because it was Wesley Snipes and it was vampire. And they were like, hey, why did it say Marvel Comics at the end of this?
Yeah, why is Stan Lee an executive producer?
Right.
Yeah.
They weren't reading the credits. That's what nerds do.
Well.
But I was going to say, like, to your point, though, Laramy, with X-Men and with Spider-Man, you had the same director coming back for both of those sequels. So there was already like a continuation, or at least they had an idea ahead of time. This one was more of because it made money, let's make a sequel. But as we saw, they were like, well, let's, I don't think they were thinking franchise in the sense of building a comic book world. They were just like franchise because it's making money. Going back to your original question, since you brought up Alien and Aliens, I personally like Alien better than Aliens. Now, is Aliens have a better budget? Does it have better effects? Does it have, it can stand on its own? Like, I saw Aliens before I saw Alien, so I didn't need to see the first one. But it's kind of the same with this one. But just because there was more money thrown at Blade 2 didn't make it better than the first Blade. And I think just because to Nicholas' point, it's not necessarily grounded, but it does feel there's more of a story that you can follow that makes a little bit more sense than this one. This one gets a little, as we've talked about, gets muddy when it gets to the plots and all that stuff. So yeah, for story, I would pick the first one. For pure action, I would take the second one. Just like First Blood, Rambo Part 2. Who would thought those two movies are connected at all? The first one is very plot, story driven. It's not really an action movie. And then you get Rambo First Blood Part 2. It's like, story, who needs that? We just want to see Sylvester Stallone kill a bunch of people. So that's what you get. So
True.
I rest my case.
Although you also have Terminator and Terminator 2. So.
And I am not a fan of Terminator 2. I know I'm
really okay.
I have watched the first Terminator so many times. When I watched the second one, I just it's cool, but I never liked the idea of the Terminator becoming good. Like that just it ruins it for me.
I can see that. I just got to ask now, out of sheer curiosity, is there any movies in which you like the sequel better than the original? Like Godfather, like that's probably the most famous. Like, do you like Godfather 2 better than the first Godfather?
I don't like either Godfather.
Yeah, I don't. I've never been a fan of Godfather movies. The only one that jumps out to me,
Back to the Future.
No, definitely not. Empire Strikes Back is a better movie than Star Wars, even though you need Star Wars to have Empire. But as many times as I've watched both, all three of the movies, Empire is far and away the best of the three in storytelling and pacing and all that. So, and it's also the one that George Lucas didn't direct. So, take that as you will.
Just to continue this, Nicholas, how about you? What's just another movie franchise where you like the sequel better than the original?
I might have to go. I mean, I disagree with Tim. I think I like Terminator 2 more than I like Terminator.
Fair point.
I mean, I like Terminator a lot, but I like the second one. Yeah. I mean, Alien and Aliens are like two separate movies. I mean, there's one is like a straight up sci-fi horror movie, and the other one is like so it's almost hard to compare those two to each other. I love Austin Powers, but I think I might like The Spy Who Shagged Me a little bit more. But at the same time, I've probably seen the first one way more than I've seen the second one.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? If you want to go really random, obscure answers to that question, I think Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls is better than the first movie.
I
I disagree.
disagree.
I'm gonna say
It's
it.
fine.
Y'all can disagree all you want.
We've all had our hot topics here, our hot takes.
I mean, how far into the franchise do you want to get? Because like you get James Bond, like Casino Royale and Skyfall.
Now see,
Skyfall.
James Bond.
Yeah, Skyfall was the
James
best.
Bond. Is one of those cases, and we could make an argument for even talking about this Blade movie. James Bond, I don't necessarily ever look at those as sequels. Like, I just look at them as, here's another story featuring this character.
Yeah, until the Daniel Craig ones, none of them are actual sequels.
Yes.
Right, true. Yeah, true.
The Daniel Craig ones were true sequels. So, all right, let's go ahead and move into our recommendations. So, something that we think that you could watch or read along with Blade 2. Or, since we kind of said stack it, there could even be a possibility of something that we think you could watch or read that would be better than Blade 2. So, Nicholas, I'll let you go first with your recommendation.
All right. So it is Guillermo del Toro, and he plays. He had the idea of the Reapers or something along those lines before he made this movie, and he ended up making it much later. With I think it was on FX called The Strain.
The Strain, yeah.
Where he definitely plays with the concepts and some of the same character designs from this movie. And it wasn't like he was ripping himself off because he had kind of had the idea ahead of time. But I think, I mean, The Strain at the beginning was a very good show. By the end, you're just like, oh my god, please end, so I can stop watching this. Like a lot of those kinds of shows, but they go on like a season too long. But I think watching early, or even just finishing it, it's only 4 seasons, but The Strain would be something I would say watching. It's not a companion piece, but it's in the same.
No, I get what you're saying.
In the same world, same creator.
Yeah, which I will point out for people who don't know, if you're familiar with The Strain as a series, it was actually a book series that Guillermo del Toro wrote. I think he had a co-writer with him, but yeah, they did it as a series of novels, and then there's even a comic book of The Strain. So that might be one we could bring in later, because I do think the comic book existed before the television show.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah. All right, Tim, what about you for a recommendation?
You kind of already mentioned it, but it was already in my head to bring up, and that's Alien or Aliens. I think because especially that middle section feels very much like Alien with the transferring, and living inside or whatever. So yeah, I would go Aliens, which I think are both better as far as storyline, but there's some good similarities there too.
Yeah. I just straight up I kind of went a route similar to Nicholas, but I said Hellboy.
Yeah, I thought about that one too. Yeah.
This was Guillermo del Toro's, first take into a comic book movie, but then he really got to do a comic book movie with Hellboy. And so, and I think that also, it works perfectly for Blade. It works perfectly for Hellboy. Del Toro's, his dark, fantasy style. Yeah. I will say Hellboy probably mimics Del Toro a little bit more than Blade 2 does. And it's funny I said mimic to do that.
See what you did there.
Not intentionally. But yeah, the way he does creature design for a lot of his movies, I think if you're like me, you were probably, even though there was this movie that was Guillermo del Toro, I wouldn't have said, oh yeah, that's Guillermo del Toro. I was not like aware, quote unquote, of Guillermo del Toro, I think, until Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, that's when I was made aware of who he was, for sure.
Yeah. So when he really truly established his style, which we then would later see in many of his other works, I think Hellboy really shows a Guillermo del Toro style more so than Blade 2 does. And then his ability to mix the action with the horror, with we'd even say comedy.
There's some good comedy in there too. Yeah,
there's some there's some good one-liners in Blade 2. And then he really allows Ron Perlman especially to bring the comedy in Hellboy. So, yeah. So I'm going to go with Hellboy. So there you are with some recommendations to go along with that. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nicholas, for our discussion of Hellboy 2, which means at some point we move on to, or I said Hellboy 2, Blade 2. Blade 2, which means at some point we do have to move on to Blade Trinity. It must be discussed.
Yay.
So,
All right.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Rate and review the show. Check out our website, movingpanelspodcast.com. It's a developing website, but you can learn some stuff about the hosts as well as check out our merchandise shop there. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up here for today. For Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Moving panels, tales collide. Ships and seas, where worlds divide. From print to screen, the legends stand. Comic games with the upper